a Heroes Welcome podcast. Bryn.
Hi, listeners. It's Maria, and I'm here with my co host.
And that's me, Liliana Bailon, and we're so excited. We're here with our special guest. Bri, how do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Bryn Murphy, and I've got a private practice called Blue Raven Family Counseling in Lakewood, Colorado.
Thank you. She's so modest on her intro for everyone out there. And we're so excited to have you here because you're going to be talking to us about a really important topic, especially, it doesn't matter if you work with adults or children. We tend to see it quite often, and it tends to be misdiagnosed
Yes.
majority of the time. So, do you want to tell us about your topic?
Yes, I would love to talk today about obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is abbreviated as OCD, and really just finding the gifts and lessons from the compulsions that people have. I offer the gold standard in OCD treatment to help support reducing OCD symptoms, but I also just want to begin the conversation around recognizing how prevalent it really is and the differences between OCD, anxiety, and any other diagnosis that it's commonly misdiagnosed as.
I love
Sure. Or even people being flippant of like, oh, I'm a little OCD about
Yes.
things.
Yes, we can totally talk about that because that's one of my biggest pet peeves of people will say like, "Oh, I'm a little OCD," or "Oh, everyone's OCD." And it's yes, all humans have obsessions and compulsions and rituals, but OCD is a really debilitating diagnosis, and it is visceral and it is hard to function every single day with the obsessions and the thoughts and the rituals and often it is joked as, and that's something that I don't want to do.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. So let's just even start. So what is the most common? Because I love how you started, which is even though we skipped right away, you said there's gifts and lessons and these
Yes.
rituals.
Yes. So I'm someone who after 13 years of therapy, my therapist doesn't diagnose, but it is very commonly known between the two of us that I have OCD. And I've known that my entire life. And it's taken a long time into my adulthood to recognize that there are a lot of my OCD that has actually made me very successful, especially in my private practice. I'm highly organized. I respond to clients in a very quick, timely manner. And my office and my house is beautifully decorated because that's an important piece of my OCD. And without that, I don't think I would be as successful. And I really consider that something that I never want to dishonor or have it go away. And I really encourage clients to find the positive lessons and the gifts of OCD. And we don't often think of it that way because it is kind of a crappy diagnosis. And if we could just shine some light on the gifts, I think that's an important thing to do.
I like that shift from it being, a disabling, very heavy, and
Yeah.
it is,
Yes.
and it's serving you, right? There is something about it that is also fueling your success for you personally that you
Absolutely.
can kind of recognize.
Absolutely. Yes. I hold both the not so great, pretty awful times that I've had in my life, and then also the, ooh, I'm actually very successful because of many of these things, and I actually don't want to give them up because they do serve a beneficial purpose in my life.
Sure.
But even that, right, for all our listeners who either they're therapists or they're working with this population or a combination of the two, right? The whole idea of can I accept this part of me and can
Yeah.
I see the gifts and lessons? There's so much I want to say even gratitude, as you said it, like there was something in
Mm,
my body that went like,
Mm,
we're okay and we're welcome if that part of me is showing up. And
yes.
my therapist is not trying to change it, is not shaming me, is not rejecting me. It's like, let's learn about this part of you.
Yes.
Almost
Yeah.
like let's embrace it.
Absolutely embrace it. And I think that because it's also stigmatized in television shows and movies, and it's like you're flipping the light switch 50 times, and you're, cleaning the dishes a thousand times in like horror movies and things like that,
mhm.
that is a part of OCD for some people, but OCD affects everything personally and in your settings and in your relationships. And there's a lot of shame around how it shows up and how it presents. And I mean, it's kind of like any other diagnosis that we first have to just name it and accept that it is a part of us, but it's not the whole of us, right? Like it's just a tiny, or, maybe it is a big part of us, but it's still only one part. That how do we then allow it to be us and then move through and find more positive and accepting thought patterns, so that when OCD spikes and when it's a heightened episode, it doesn't feel as the world is ending. And I don't want to ever talk about it because I'm going to get laughed at.
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of shame associated with
Yeah.
that. And I know on a clinician side, I know there's a lot of apprehension of working with someone who comes
Yeah.
in with a diagnosis or considering that diagnosis. Why do you think that still is?
I think because there's just so many misconceptions about OCD, that I can't speak for all clinicians, obviously, but in my experience, I don't think enough clinicians know what questions to ask to screen in or screen out OCD. And so then we actually rob people of the opportunity to share their experiences. And I think people would be surprised that if you ask certain questions, you might find that instead of generalized anxiety or phobias or eating disorders too, there's actually an OCD component underneath, and potentially that's the diagnosis that's been driving all of the
Mm,
other diagnoses that people are more familiar with and more quickly diagnose and assess for. That I think clinicians are wary of the unknown, and clients live in such an imaginary, scary, faulty belief world with OCD that I don't know what's real, because it feels very real in my body and it feels so real in my head. My brain has mastered the ability to think that my faulty narratives are true. And
mhm.
that's a terrifying thing to have to admit out loud to a therapist that might not know about OCD. And then where do we go from there?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I think is that right as you're talking, and I'm thinking of past trainings that I have done. Definitely in the last 2 years, I will say, probably three. I feel like there's certain trainers who are changing the way that they're teaching about
Yeah.
OCD. But before, especially when you're a new therapist and you're going for behaviorally, what can I do to change this?
Yes.
And that's most of the trainings that we all got. Can we agree on that,
Mhm.
or am I the only
Yeah,
one?
absolutely.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
absolutely.
Versus now the invitation that you're giving to mental health therapists, including paid therapists, of can we assess properly? Can we wonder out loud by inviting the client in regards to, how is this getting on the way? What are the gifts,
Mhm.
right? How can we embrace this? Like, can we see that? And that's feels beautiful because it's inviting that part of you that has been stigmatized or has been an inconvenience for others.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's no knock to my therapist because I will always see her. I think she's incredible. But from a personal experience, I didn't share about my OCD experiences until about 8 years into my relationship with her. And it has nothing to do with her knowledge or ability to hold that space for me. I carried, and I'm in the field, and I carried so much weirdness and uncomfortability and true shame around openly talking about and sharing the very intrusive negative thoughts in my head and how it impacted every day, hours of my day, and I didn't know where to start. And it is unfortunate that, I mean, again, we have the behavioral theories for a very good reason, and sometimes that is exactly what is needed for certain OCD versions. And then there are other versions of OCD that are very connected to our attachment strategies and the way that our body and mind don't talk to each other, how we get disconnected. And I think it's so crucial to be able to combine all the behavioral components and also the attachment and the experiential and the holistic ways, so that when you're replacing these intrusive and yucky symptoms, you are not as afraid that they're going to return with an even bigger force.
Oh, I like that. I like that. You had mentioned too that you work from like the gold standard. So for
Yeah.
our listeners who are still stuck in this behavioral mindset because of our training, what is that gold standard and where can they seek out more information about that?
Yeah, so I offer what's called exposure response prevention, which is ERP. And it's considered the gold treatment because there's a lot of research that backs up evidence that says that people who go through ERP have a 75% chance of eliminating or reducing OCD. OCD is a lifelong and chronic diagnosis, but it can come and go over time, and it can come in waves. And ERP has demonstrated that the waves, when it does return, are pretty minimal. And so all of the behavioral research has truly backed up that it is a very useful form of treatment for people. And a lot of people like it because it is short. It's typically about 25 sessions. And you initially start with an OCD assessment that just screens in all the different camps of OCD, because there's a lot of different versions of it and subtypes of it. And then after you go through the assessment and you determine, am I in one camp or am I actually in all of these camps? And which one feels the scariest? Which one do I want to scaffold and start with so that I can feel more prepared and better? Then you go through creating a hierarchy of worst to best scenarios. And then from there, you create an exposure scale. And then this is the scariest part for people, which is why people don't want to do this, is you intentionally put yourself in anxiety inducing settings and you expose yourself to the faulty thoughts. And the goal is to prove OCD wrong, to trash those beliefs and narratives. And then after you do that, you do like a relapse prevention, and then that's it, you terminate. So it is a good treatment. In my experience, it also misses the attachment piece, because we're saying you have to be anxious, you have to be stressed, you have to be exposed. And the therapist is not allowed to or not supposed to reassure your nervous system and not supposed to help regulate. And so whenever I'm talking to my clients about it, before we do ERP, I think it's important that we have the foundational piece of co-regulation and attachment strategies of why are OCD symptoms coming up? What is the ritual trying to get you to feel? What's the threat that either is real or is perceived in your mind and it feels very real? Once we determine that, what are things that we can naturally soothe our nervous systems with before we go in and just shake it all up?
I love that.
So for everyone who's there, I don't know if everyone catch this because I did, and I was like, let me write it down. Rituals are trying to get you to feel something. So even the rituals in the OCD, it's information.
Yes.
Right? Like how beautiful our bodies are, that they're constantly giving you information. And then we tend to get on the way, like it's inconvenient, not today. You know what? I don't like this behavior, go change it. And even as beautifully as you stated, which is, I'm going to name this all out. I'm going to keep getting crap about it, but it's okay.
Yes.
I make peace with that. But
Yeah.
can we stop suggesting in these trainings that there's only one way of treating? I love the way that you put it, from a narrative, behavioral, holistic, attachment, exposure. Like it's all these things to help something versus just being a purist and this is the only way to do
Yes.
this.
Which I know, I mean, in my supervision when I was going through ERP training, I had gotten to some spicy conversations of, this feels not like me. It doesn't feel like my language and it doesn't really align with me. But I so see the importance
Yeah.
in reframing the cognitive thoughts
Yeah.
that we do need the behavioral component with. And it also felt like something is missing because most of my rituals are mental rituals. And I think that's where a lot of therapists forget that it's not always visible. There's a lot of invisible, unknown OCD rituals, and the brain is a beautiful and magical organ, and it also is scary, and it can go in some very dark, twisted places. And who wants to admit the thoughts that we're experiencing and having? And we have to be able to ask questions about the mental rituals because that consumes the whole soul so often.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's nice too to just reaffirm that you can do trainings and you can find effective models and then still make it
Yeah.
your own.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. I don't know how to not do that in just life in general, right? Like we learn so many different things and some things land and other things go out the window and it doesn't resonate with us. But for ERP, I do love the idea of trashing the thoughts because they aren't real. They are not realistic. We spend so much time in a true OCD imaginary land, and it feels visceral and it feels very rooted in facts, but it is not fact. And if we can trash that and have more space to feel safe and secure and connected to ourselves, of course, I want to do that. And that's why we need the behavioral part with this. But if we can also get comfortable with our own nervous system and attachment strategies and understand that obsessions, are the, reoccurring thoughts and images, but the compulsions are the act of trying to reassure the anxiety. They are amazing. It is truly just trying to reassure us because we're freaking out and we're feeling really anxious. And why not just think that for a little bit and then be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to tweak some of these because some of these are just annoying and time consuming and expensive and I don't want any more.
I love this. How many of you are, and I think most of the play therapists who have been posting to let us know that they watched the movie Inside Out too.
Yes.
We know you have watched it, but the image of the board with anxiety, as you were describing that, that's
My
what popped in my mind.
gosh.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Well, and even just anxiety's overall message, right? Like I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am here to help. You're in my way. Let me help. And yes, that image of them being frozen with the storm around, I'm like, such a beautiful
Yes.
like depiction of anxiety. Such a beautiful. And I mean, every one of us, anyone who's listening, we all have anxiety. We all have things that we do to make sure that we keep ourselves safe and reassured and grounded. The difference, it sounds like, is really when it becomes impacting in daily life to a
Yes.
dysfunctional level for many people finally diagnosed with OCD.
Yeah.
Yes, that you're right. We all have anxiety, and anxiety lives in our nervous systems for a very good reason. I never want to ignore it. We can just find different ways to speak to it and befriend it. But in terms of OCD, you have to have at least 1 or more hours per day for it to be that diagnosis. You
Mm.
have to have the O, which is the obsessions, which again are the reoccurrent thoughts, images, or urges that are intrusive and unwanted. And then you have to have the C, which is the compulsions and also referred to as rituals, which are the repetitive physical or mental acts that happen in response to the obsession. And that has to be at least 1 or more hour a day.
Mhm.
And often OCD is misdiagnosed as generalized anxiety. And when I look at the main criteria of generalized anxiety disorders, there's like three main differences because the first criteria for generalized anxiety is that it's excessive worry for everyday concerns. OCD focuses on very specific, catastrophic things. The next one is that the categories of worry are changed. They're interchangeable over time. And the ultimate fears with OCD are, again, specific and consistent. And then the last one is for generalized anxiety, worry is chronic and throughout the day, but OCD, it's triggered by a specific situation, and then we avoid that situation to the best of our ability. Avoidance is a really big key with OCD, and it is a key with anxiety too. But there's subtle differences between these diagnoses, and I think it's so important that we're just naming the differences because the treatment is very different.
Oh, I just love even how do you compare the two to give us this image of this is the difference and this is what to look for.
Yes.
And it sounds like even when you're treating it, one is lifelong.
Yep.
So you may not be in therapy all the time. It sounds like you're gonna take pauses and then come back when it flares.
Yes.
I'm using the word flares because this will, and I think we talk about it, Maria, too, right? When we did the presentation for dynamic disability, this will apply for dynamic disability when you have these flares and it
Yes.
takes so much from you. So for
Yes.
everyone who's listening to us, we've been talking in the last couple of episodes about dynamic disability, and this is one of those diagnoses that
Yes.
apply to it.
Yes, because it is when it's flared up, it is so time consuming and very debilitating. And it truly affects your relationships, past and future thinking, eating, values, sexual life and intimacy, pets, driving, religion, exercise, schoolwork, and just work in general, identities. Pregnancy and postpartum can be a really big trigger for many people. Dreams, health, friends, family, holidays, memories, you name it, it seeps into truly every part of you. And it can come up in different ways too, in different subtypes. Like you might be able to heal one subtype, and then a trigger comes up and flares again, and there's a whole other new subtype. And then it's how do we take what we've learned from previous support and then mix it up again and find a different way to reduce this new version of it? Or do we decide that actually this version is not too bad and I can just recognize that it's getting flared up and it's getting a little elevated, but I'm okay. And it's okay to be okay with it too.
Yeah, I think that also goes along with our talk about dynamic disabilities, right? Our goal, we work in a medical model, right? So the medical model would like us to get rid of all symptoms of said diagnosis.
The
Can,
dream.
can we all agree that that is garbage?
Yes.
I love my job and I love my license, but like we are going to have, in this case, they're going to have OCD.
Yes.
Some of it might be worth accepting and thanking and having gratitude for it serving us well.
Mm-hmm.
And we work on reducing the debilitation to the rest of our life and our daily functioning.
Yes.
And this is not something you will physically see happening, right? And so that's the other piece about invisible illness and dynamic disabilities is like, it's not that you have a missing limb that says, oh, yes, you have OCD because you are missing specifically your right arm, right? Yeah, this is all happening. And if you're close and in an intimate relationship, perhaps you'll see some of the behaviors, but you're saying that a lot of the compulsions are internal, they're mind compulsions.
Yes. For many people and myself included, I do have like very obvious known rituals, but I'm like, okay, my house is beautiful. My house is clean and organized. I can handle the intrusive thoughts that come with that if my house is messy. But it is all internal of my wheels are constantly spinning. And when I go through a flare up moment, I often tell myself like, whoa, I have just lost myself. I have just gone into this whole other world. And what do I need to do to then reconnect to myself? How do I return to who I am in a more full head and heart aligned way? And what has helped me in the past? And why is this happening right now? What is it that my OCD is trying to get me to very clearly pick up on the message?
I love that.
Very clearly. It is very obvious when the thoughts go on.
Oh my God, I feel like we can keep going and going, and it's getting close to the time where we have to say goodbye. So, how can our listeners find you, either to refer clients or to
Yes.
call you for consultations?
Yes, you can look up Blue Raven Family Counseling. I've got my website. I'm on Psychology Today, Bryn Murphy. And you can also email or contact me. My Instagram is also Blue Raven Family Counseling. And reach out for consultation, reach out to talk about what questions to ask on your intake. I think that's a good start of what am I missing on my intake paperwork? What do I potentially need to add? Or if there's clients who maybe think that they have OCD or want to explore OCD, then I would love to be able to support them on their journey of finding the gifts and lessons and tweaking what we need to tweak.
Oh, beautiful. For everyone who's listening, they're panicking because they're like, it went too fast. We will make sure that we have her contact information below. So thank you. I mean,
Oh my
I
gosh,
feel like
yes.
energized right now. There's so much information. So thank you for being here, and thank
Yes,
you
thank
for
you.
sharing your gifts.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for demystifying OCD. If nothing else, I hope people are listening and going, oh, I can stay curious about this.
Yes.
Maybe what I have learned is not what is, gold standard anymore. And perhaps being willing to be curious and lean in a little bit.
Yes, that's my biggest hope is that we can remove the stigma. And also 2.5% of people in their lifetime will have been diagnosed with OCD, which is the size of New York. So like New York's a pretty big state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's common.
Not gonna let go of that image anymore.
Of course,
There's a lot
Liliana's
of
gonna.
people jammed in that state.
I know. Liliana's gonna be like, everyone in New York has OCD.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it is. That's why they're always like walking this fast, walking too fast. Chill, man.
But that is a nice visual representation of how
Yeah.
this is.
It's very common.
Yeah.
So again, thank you. For everyone who's listening, again, we will have Prince information in there. Until next time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.